What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 27. And I want to thank you guys all for tuning in last week, showing some love on the show, especially in the YouTube space. I really do appreciate that. And I hope you guys have had a good week. This week has just kind of flown by for me as I've been, kind of busy at work. Put up a YouTube short video on the YouTube channel and, got out, did some golfing and stuff like that. So it's kind of been it just flew by for me. So I don't know. And there's been quite a bit of news that have dropped in the gaming space, some of which we're going to be discussing. And that's exciting. There's lots of stuff going on. And next week, or at least I guess the week you're listening to this podcast when it goes live, is Gamescom. And there's a couple showcases. Jeff Keighley's doing his opening night at Gamescom Live, which is basically going to be one big giant advertisement, but there might be some cool announcements sprinkled in there. So maybe some stuff to talk about next week. We shall see, but that's exciting. And I don't know. I've just also kind of been in this mood this week where I just haven't really been into gaming. I don't know. Have you guys ever gone through that? You just kind of go through these slums where no video game or anything kind of sounds good to play. And sometimes I feel like, you just need a break. Take a break, maybe, divulge into some other hobby and just kind of catch your breath a little bit. I don't know. That's kind of where my headspace has been at this last week. But I don't know. It happens, Now, for those that are new or uninitiated to the show, remember, the best way you can support the show is to drop a rating on the podcast platform you're listening on. Leave us a comment on YouTube. That certainly helps out with all the algorithms, helps people find the show, gets us in there, which we could certainly use. You can join me over on Locals, the Patreon alternative platform, the GamesiteChronicles.locals.com. You can also check out the podcast and listen to it there. You can check out my YouTube channel where we've been putting up some shorts and the podcast goes up there at youtube.com/Gamesite. Be sure to subscribe if you check me out over there. And actually, I'm going to do a new YouTube, like a short series of videos, putting it up on YouTube, where I'm going to share some of my favorite gaming collectibles that I have in my collection. And so kind of just sharing and reviewing one collectible per video over a series of videos. We'll probably do a cadence of once a week. That's a pretty good cadence for me in my schedule. So check out that. Stay tuned for that. I'll let you know when the first video of that goes live on the YouTubes, and maybe post some on Twitter as well. We shall see. You can follow me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And remember, new episodes of the show go live each and every week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And that's Mondays, by the way. Now, for this week's show, like I said, there's quite a few news items that I wanted to cover. So I've cherry-picked a few of the stories that really interested me and that I thought would be cool to talk about. As well as I wanted to celebrate PT, the playable teaser, also known as Silent Hills, from the mastermind Kojima himself. They just celebrated the 8th anniversary. That's just passed. So I want to celebrate that game, talk about that a little bit at the end of today's episode. And the other thing I'm going to try to, actually I should have mentioned this more at the top, is put in timestamps for these various topics and sections, at least into the YouTube version of the show, so you can kind of skip around if you'd like. So check that out if you're interested. Now, a couple of stories I wanted to touch on this week is there's been some leaked footage of Helldivers 2 that's launched on PlayStation, and that sound in the background will not work. Let me mute that. Okay, got that squared away. So leaked footage of Helldivers 2. There's been some controversy over a Spider-Man PC mod. Dead Island 2 has a new listing up on Amazon. And the Embracer Group made some big moves this week. So more acquisition news in the gaming world that we'll talk about. But before we get into that, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. And of course, as always, right into the show, let me know what games you've been playing so we can incorporate that and talk about those. But as for me, I finally beat Ghostwire Tokyo, everyone. I've been playing this game for the last few weeks. I finally beat it, and I got the platinum, the coveted platinum, over on PlayStation, and it took me approximately 45 hours, but the last actually not the last, but 8 of those hours, at least approximately, were from grinding to get those random spirit parades that I was missing and avoided like the plague throughout the entirety of the game, to get the rest of my spirits and get the rest of those collectibles. And so that was a grind and kind of annoying. But outside of that, and despite it, I very much enjoyed this game. Very much enjoyed it. And the ending and the story's conclusion was great. I think one of the things that makes this game great is just how much it showcases like Japanese culture. It's just sprinkled in throughout. There's some history in there, and it's really fun to just explore and see Tokyo, especially in this very haunting and desolate setting in the way it's portrayed. It's really, really cool. So I definitely recommend this game, especially because it's been like $30 on sale at like every retailer. That's certainly worth that price tag, that price of admission on the PlayStation 5. And when it eventually comes to Xbox and Game Pass, yeah, check it out. It's great. It's a really fun game. Go in with the mindset that it's a collectathon and have fun with it. It's really cool and really fun. Now, the other game, also talked about this one before, Live Alive. Continuing playing through that. I played through an additional character story, so I'm now 5 of the 7 characters that I've played through. And I actually have a correction from last week. I said I was about 13 to 14 hours. I was actually like 11 or 10 and a half maybe last week in my playthrough. Now I'm about 14 hours in. So a little correction from last week. And I played the near future character story, and that was awesome. That was really cool. Definitely unique from the others. Fun story. I liked it. And excited to play the other 2. And then again, see just how this game, if at all, comes together in the end. So I'll definitely plan on playing more of it. We'll continue and we'll report on as I play through more. And then I moved on to another game, but I wanted to touch on this because I'm curious if you guys ever encounter this. So anytime I finish a game, it's always like, okay, like what game do I want to play next? And that's kind of where I was. So I'm playing Live Alive on the side, but then like, what's the next game I want to jump into? And I find myself constantly in this situation where I feel overwhelmed by the choices of games I have to jump into. And it leads me into sometimes like almost like decision paralysis where I can't decide what game I want to jump into. Like, do you guys ever experience that? Seriously. Like, I don't know if maybe I'm like super fortunate and in a position to where I have a disgusting giant backlog of games right behind me to where I'm like, okay, I have so many games to choose from. I don't know what to choose. Like maybe I'm just super fortunate in that position, but I think there's a lot of us out there that are in a similar position. And in thinking about this, I kind of thought about like, okay, well, what are the factors I think about when I'm picking out my next game? So again, I'm curious how you guys go about this, but it comes down to like 4 things for me when I'm choosing the next game I want to jump into after I've completed a game. First is mood. You know, like what kind of mood am I in? Am I in for like more of a casual, like shooter style game? Do I want to get involved in like to a deep story, maybe something casual, something really, I don't know, like what kind of mood am I in? Because your mood certainly affects the types of games you want to play and enjoy and offer that, some level of escapism, right? The next thing is how long it takes to beat it. And this is a primary factor in my decision. Because as I've mentioned so many times before, my time is limited and I prefer smaller, shorter titles or, more reasonable titles that are going to respect my time. And so I'm more inclined to play something, say 20 to 30 hours as opposed to 60 to 100 hours. That's just my preference, and I get such a sense of accomplishment, and I guess it really tickles my OCD, if you will, when I complete a game. Like I love completing games, kind of checking that game off my list and being able to move on to something else. So how long it takes to beat it is vitally important. Another thing is what are the games I've previously played, like the types of games. And I think about kind of the sprint we went through with Dying Light 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and Elden Ring, and having played through the first two, Dying Light 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and then dabbled in, probably 40 hours or so into Elden Ring, like that's a lot of open world games. And I totally lost my thought because my neighbor just pulled up next to my driveway and just totally caught my eye, and just my thought process was gone. But okay, so put a lot of time into all three of those games. They're all open world games. And so I need a palate cleanser. So I needed something different. And so that's kind of what I mean here is like, if I'm coming off a big open world game, maybe the next game I don't really want to play is an open world game. Maybe I need something to cleanse the palate, something more casual, maybe a platformer, maybe a shooter, something like that. And then lastly, what games are out on the horizon that I want? What are some upcoming games that I'm super excited for? So for example, like Splatoon 3 is coming out here in a couple weeks on, September 9th. I'm thinking, okay, whatever game I pick up next, that I want to be able to get through that so then I have room for Splatoon 3 when that comes out. And I find myself in a situation so many times where there's games that I'm really excited for that I'm picking up, and by the time they come out, I'm still invested into some other game, and so they kind of just go to the backlog. And I may or may not get to them in a timely fashion. That happens all the time. But I don't know, I just kind of went on to this little rant that I was just kind of thinking about, because that's the kind of the process I go through and things that I think about when I'm selecting the next game. And after beating Ghostwire Tokyo, I was in that predicament again. And I thought about jumping. I know we talked about the demo for Dialfield Chronicles. I still want to jump into that, but I just really wasn't feeling that at this time. And I was kind of looking for something maybe just kind of casual where I can jump in, jump out. And so I actually jumped into PGA Tour 2K21 on the PlayStation. And I don't know why I've never played this game before. It's the first golf game I think we've had since Tiger Woods. It's been a while since the Tiger Woods game has come out. And I remember when it came out and I was like, okay, golf games are back. This is awesome. And never picked it up right away. But I know it was free on PlayStation Plus here. I want to say at some point last year, towards the end of last year. So I downloaded it, hopped into it, started my character, my career, and it's fun. I mean, as someone who's super into golf, like I try to go golf once a week. Like I'm like dedicated to golf. I've got the golf bug. I'm all in. I want to get good at golf in real life. And this is something, even as a kid, like I've always kind of been exposed to golf and kind of golfed here and there, but now I'm like all in. Like this is a sport I want to be good at. I want to work my ass off and I want to get good at this game. So I try to play at least once a week. I try to hit the range, when I can. And I'm in. And I watch golf now. I am all in on golf. So I don't know how I've avoided this game for this long, but it is awesome. It's the golf sim game. It's fun, like curving your shots, getting those perfect drives, getting those putts, trying to, spin the ball and all this stuff. I love it. And right now I'm doing career mode. I'm doing it on easy just because I wasn't sure how difficult the game would be. And I kind of just want to casually play it, but it's awesome. And I am thoroughly enjoying it. I've played, I think three round tournament rounds or whatever. I'm kind of doing trying to get my PGA Tour card in the career mode. And it's just a nice game to kind of hop in, play around, and then hop out. I love it. Freaking love it. So now let's jump into some of those new items. And the first one I wanted to talk about is Helldivers 2. So Push Square reports that leaked footage from a trailer for Helldivers 2 was posted to Twitter. And I saw the article yesterday at the time of this recording. I'm recording on Friday. So I saw it yesterday on Thursday. And the video was up. It was just a clip, 10 seconds long, that showed the beginning of a trailer. So no gameplay because it was like cinematic. And it was within the editing program. So whoever posted this, whatever they were doing, they were editing the trailer for Helldivers 2. And so, again, nothing too exciting. You didn't miss anything if you didn't see this clip. But shortly after that clip was posted, it was later removed due to a response from a copyright holder, which tells us this is real. Helldivers 2 is real. We're going to see a trailer for it soon, presumably at Gamescom, coming up next week. And I'm excited. And also, if you guys remember that big NVIDIA leak that happened, I want to say early last year, with the tons of games. Like all those games have come true. Like all these games are real, people. And Helldivers 2 was on there. And this has me super stoked. Super, super stoked. Now, the original game came out back in, I think, 2015. And I believe when it launched, it was a PlayStation Plus game. So I remember getting it. I remember I hopped in, and I didn't understand this kind of almost like joint semi-live service type of world, like this joint shared world that you have with other players. Like I didn't fully understand that, but I really enjoyed it. And it was awesome. It was fun to play. And I just played it solo. I might have played a match or two cooperatively, but I mostly played it solo, but it was just a ton of fun. Really, really ton of fun. I loved it. And I think there's a lot that they can do with a sequel here, especially kind of given the nature now, the more common nature of live service games. Not that I think this is going to be some big live service game with tons of microtransactions or anything like that, but I think you can do some cool stuff with its world. It's this kind of shared world that you have with other players. And I think what would actually be even cooler, since it is an isometric shooter, to add some loot elements. Add some looting into this game. You know, maybe take some influence from games like Diablo and do some of that. I think that would be awesome. Now, there's a Housemarque game that they did on PlayStation called Alienation. And it was kind of a similar style game, isometric. You're shooting up aliens. That one had some loot elements into it. And so I think if you kind of incorporate that, give us some sweet, sweet loot, maybe some loot to grind for, some leveling and stuff like that, this game could be dope. I don't know. That's just something I think I would just crave for this style of game and going on different missions and collecting loot, shooting aliens. That to me just sounds freaking amazing. Totally amazing. So we'll see what happens when this game finally gets announced. Again, presumably at gameplay. I think probably by next week we'll have seen some of this game. And I'm hoping it comes out. Not that we need more games out soon, because I personally, I think there's tons to be playing right now, but this is one I would certainly pick up day one and jump into, for sure. I think it looks great. Now, this next item, I debated whether or not to talk about here on the podcast, because it is inherently, political. It delves into the world of politics and stuff like that. And I know for a lot of people, myself included, like when you listen to a video games podcast, you don't want to, you're not tuning in to talk politics or anything like that. But I want to touch on it and kind of share my thoughts on it, kind of for two reasons, really. First is that, politics are embedded into our culture. They are certainly involved in video games. And while we don't have to dive into, the nitty gritty of politics, I think we do have to look at it from a video games angle when it does touch video games. And the reality is, video games are political, and they can tell political ideologies, stories, etc. And I think it's also important to recognize that the majority of the video games industry, whether it be through media journos, influencers, content creators, etc., the majority of the people that are in, I guess, positions of power within the industry all tend to lean one political side, which is, the left, the quote unquote progressive side. And often missed is that alternative viewpoint and voice, because it's usually shunned. The other reason is I also don't want to be afraid to talk about some of this stuff. I mean, this is my podcast. And I think it's important sometimes to kind of raise your voice and, share your thoughts on a particular issue. It doesn't have to be preachy. It doesn't have to I'm not trying to tell anyone to think one way or another, but I think it's important to kind of recognize these when they come up and talk about them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think anyways. So the rub is all about the PC version of Spider-Man, aka one of the best-selling PlayStation 4 games, and a mod. So over the last couple of days, some dramas unfolded where basically the kind of rundown is there was a mod that was created that replaced pride flags in the game with American flags. And this sparked controversy and drama, of course, basically with folks saying that this is homophobic. And that outrage basically caused two mod sites, Nexus Mods, which I guess is like the biggest mod site out there, as well as ModsDB, to remove the mod and then ban the user and all their associated accounts. And it also caused the usual cycle of like virtue signaling, outrage, and of course, just some amazing commentary online. Like sometimes I don't know why I do this. I think it's just one, it's out of sheer curiosity, and two, I think it's also, it's one of those things where like you can't look away. Like you kind of just gotta kind of go down the rabbit hole. But man, any of the sites that have posted this or anyone talking about this, just the comments related to it are just toxic. And you can kind of see the hive mind mentality from a lot of these folks. But nonetheless, that's what happened basically. And I gotta say, I don't understand the outrage, and I don't understand how the mod is homophobic. I don't see it. And I find the whole kind of situation just kind of annoys me because, one, I guess maybe because I don't understand it, but the other thing is that I also think this is a perfect example of the current state of our political climate and culture here in the United States. I think this represents it like perfectly. And that frustrates me a little bit. Again, I don't understand how it's homophobic. I don't understand how it inherently hurts anybody. Again, my understanding of the mod in its intent is basically switching settings that are already in the game to, I guess, I think it's a Middle Eastern version of the game. And, kind of it does that. But, just generally speaking, like if someone doesn't want to display a pride flag, that doesn't mean that they hate gay people or trans people or whoever within that community. That doesn't mean that at all. I mean, some people just, maybe they don't want to hold the rainbow flag or have a rainbow shirt or whatever. It doesn't mean they hate you. They're not against you inherently. And I think most of all, I just can't stand this mentality, particularly those of the political left or the progressive side, and I put progressive in quotes there, that it's basically the mentality is if you're not with us, you're against us. And it's a very black and white. And I don't get it because that's not real life. That's not reality. And I think that's a really bad mindset to have. Like you're going to make a lot of enemies that way. But I mean, it's almost as if like, if you don't have the same ideological viewpoints 100% and agree on every single thing, then you're, a bigot, a racist, a sexist, a whatever ist person, and you're calling for violence and you need to be canceled, all of that stuff. And it's like, that's just simply not true. It's not true at all. There's gray in that. And you don't have to agree with someone on every single issue known to man in order to associate yourselves with someone. It used to be a time where you could agree to disagree with someone and then you move on. You guys go have lunch or you go hang out or do whatever. That's like not the case today. Like that's not even an option. And I don't understand why or where that comes from. Because there are plenty of people that I associate with that I don't agree with them on every single particular issue, but we still hang out and we're still friends. There's nothing wrong with that. That's life. That's normal. Now I've seen arguments, a couple different arguments here for and against, this kind of drama that's taken place. And, the first is, people are saying, oh, this is free speech and it's censorship. And I can see that point to the sense that, this is certain, I guess, a certain level of expression, right? Freedom of expression, I guess, because a flag is representative of a country, ideology, etc. That's probably why a lot of these folks are upset, because that pride flag is representative of them and their identities, right? So it's their expression. But by removing someone else's expression, that's kind of, I guess, hinders their First Amendment rights here in the United States. I guess to a degree, right? Like, you can go down this rabbit hole, and I'm not here to debate whether or not this is freedom, the First Amendment thing or not. That's not what I'm here to. But I think from that angle, you could kind of say that is a version of censorship, right? Which I don't particularly agree with. And the counter argument to the whole free speech thing is that hate speech isn't free speech. That's the kind of the common theme I saw around this. And first of all, no one can define hate speech. Like, you just can't. It doesn't exist, in my opinion. Actually, not even really my opinion. I think objectively you can say hate speech doesn't exist by definition, because no one can define it. It's kind of this ever-evolving, almost gray area term that can mean anything. And it's kind of this weaponized term that basically means anything I don't like or agree with. That's what hate speech is. And like the whole thing is free speech is all inclusive. And if you're not on board with that, which means you may see or hear something you don't agree with, then you don't support free speech. It's really as simple as that, because free speech is all inclusive, the good and the bad. But that's the beauty of it. And if you can't get on board with that, then you really don't support freedom of speech. The second thing is, again, I don't understand how swapping this flag is hateful. This simple mod that just swaps some flags out, how is that hateful? Again, just because someone doesn't have said pride flag does not mean that they hate you. And newsflash, not everyone wants to wave around rainbow flags, especially in other countries. Not everyone is on board with LGBT, that community, as much as America is. I mean, just look at Middle East, look at China, North Korea, some of these totalitarian countries, not really on the same boat as us here in the States. Just saying. Another argument that I've seen from some is that this is only a small section of the game with the pride flags, and I think there's a pride mural too, if I remember correctly. So the question is, and I'm sorry if you can hear my dog in the background, but the question with that is what's the big deal? And I would turn that question around back to that person and say, yeah, what is the big deal if it's so small? If this is just a small section of the game, what's the big deal here? Why do you care if someone mods their own game? What does it matter? How does that affect you? Because in the context of mod, you don't have to download it. You don't have to put it on your game. Like, it doesn't affect the game that you're playing and enjoying. Now, I'd be curious if we'd see the same reaction if the flag was swapped with, say, the Ukraine flag instead of the American flag. Would we see the same reaction? I don't know. I generally don't know. I don't think we would. But again, I could be wrong. Maybe there is some consistency there. Be a first. The other thing I kind of see thrown around there is this term like that the LGBTQ community is this oppressed group, and this is just actions taken against a progressed group, which is why Nexus mods and all them, they don't support these types of actions against oppressed minority groups or whatever. And just to that, I got to say, like, how are you oppressed? You're given like an entire month dedicated to you, your lifestyle, your identity. Everyone throws up their rainbow flags. Every major corporation is behind you and just shares their over support and validation for you, especially within that month, but even consistently outside of that month across like almost every major institution and area within the United States. And if you're here in the United States, you live in the freest nation in the world for now. So I must be missing something here because I don't see it. So I don't get it. I just got to say, I don't understand. And maybe for kind of bringing this up and kind of sharing my viewpoints, I'll get called a whatever-ist, sexist, racist, bigot, whatever. And that's, that I guess comes with the territory, but I don't hate gay people. I don't, you're welcome here on my podcast. Absolutely. That's the whole point, is for us to kind of come around video games, to get together and share our passion for video games. All people and all backgrounds are welcome, unless you're, but you get what I'm saying. That we're here for the love of video games. That's the common thread that we share. And so, your background, your race, whatever immutable characteristic you have, that doesn't matter to me. We're here to talk about games. That shouldn't matter. Now, I may not agree with your way of life, and it may conflict with my own personal, religious beliefs and my convictions, but it doesn't mean I hate you or that I'm your enemy. And that's what I don't understand. So I'll leave this topic with two final thoughts. One is a Twitter response from someone in the comment sections that I thought was a great response to this. And so this person responded and said, 1, project onto others, all users, one's worst possible presumption of their motivations. 2, pat self on back for job well done. 3, enjoy resultant synthesis of good person, chemical, and brain that encourages one to again seek the worst in others as to imagine the best in oneself. And I think that is a brilliant response. That's also known as projection. And I think we see a lot of that, especially here. Like, don't assume the worst in everyone. That's not a good starting point. The last thing I'll say and leave this topic with is that if your entire self-esteem and self-worth is predicated on validation and based on immutable characteristics such as race, sexual orientation, skin color, gender, etc., then I think that says a lot more about you than it does anyone else. So I'll leave it at that. But I think it's an important topic to acknowledge and to share thoughts on. So let me know your thoughts. Feel free to write in. Now, the next news item, and certainly maybe a more fun one to talk about, is Dead Island 2 has a new listing. So Wario64 on Twitter, who if you don't follow Wario64, I highly recommend you follow the guy because he's always tweeting out awesome deals for games and collector's editions, etc. So a great follow on Twitter. Highly recommend it. But he spotted an updated Amazon listing for Dead Island 2. And so the listing is a day one edition of the game. It's got new cover art, shows a couple new screenshots. And first thing I got to say is the new cover actually looks pretty dope. I got to say, I think it kind of encapsulates the kind of mood of Dead Island, at least the original one. I think it does a good job there. And there's a new description of the game. So that description says, a deadly virus is spreading across Los Angeles, California, turning its inhabitants into ravenous zombies. The city is in quarantine and the military has retreated. Bitten, infected, but more than just immune, you learn to harness the zombie inside. Only you and a handful of other swaggering fellows who happen to be resistant to the pathogen hold the future of LA and humanity in the balance. As you uncover the truth behind the outbreak, you'll discover who or what you are. Survive, evolve, save the world. Just another day in LA. The much-loved zombie saga is back with the unique formula of horror, dark humor, and over-the-top zombie slaying spanning an epic pulp adventure. Dead Island 2 is a thrilling first-person action RPG that takes players across a brand new playground. Stylish, vibrant, and flooded with zombie infection, explore iconic, gore-drenched Los Angeles, meet larger-than-life characters, slay countless foes in exquisitely bloody detail, and evolve to become the ultimate zombie slayer. See you in Hell A. End quote. I actually like that last kind of tagline, see you in Hell A. That's pretty good. So kind of exciting, I think. I mean, really interesting. And there's a couple things in the description here that really stand out to me. First is you're bitten and infected, but you're immune. I mean, that kind of rubs me the wrong way because that's kind of the angle Dying Light 2 took. And again, I don't think that spoils anything. You learn that pretty early on in the game. But it's kind of the angle they took. So that I'm not super optimistic about that portion. But what I am excited about, first-person action RPG. Got it. Love it. Makes sense. Stylish, vibrant. I like that too. I think you kind of see that in the cover art as well. So good vibes there. And let's see. So unique formula of horror. I love that. That's key because that's what I think Dying Light 2 was missing. Dark humor, which I think fits perfectly within Dying Light. If you've played, not Dying Light, I'm sorry, Dead Island. Fits perfectly in there because the first Dead Island kind of had that a little bit. At least the characters kind of brought some humor to that. So I like that. Hopefully that's a return to form there. And over-the-top zombie slaying, which sounds perfect because some of the weapons you create in the game, the melee weapons and stuff are just, they're over the top. And I love it. So I am a little optimistic here in reading this new description. So we shall see. Now, presumably, this is another Gamescom announcement. This kind of leaked maybe ahead of time. Someone over at one of the Amazon sites maybe pushed the button a little bit early for this new update. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see this next week at Gamescom. Now, if you'll recall, the Dead Island 2 was originally announced all the way back in 2014. 2014, that's 8 years ago. That's a long ass time ago. And it's gone through multiple development studios, and it's been in development hell for years. Just years. It's had a really troubled development. So it's gone through Jaeger Development Studios, Sumo Digital Studios, and then I think most recently who's doing it now is Dam Buster, which is an internal Deep Silver studio. And the original creators of Dead Island, which is Techland, they made Dead Island, then they made the Dead Island Riptide game, then they did Dying Light, if I'm not mistaken. So Dead Island 2 has always been a different developer that's not Techland. So interesting stuff here. Interesting stuff. Now, the original Dead Island came out all the way back in 2011. And if you remember that game had the iconic, which is actually hailed as one of the greatest video game trailers of all time in their cinematic reveal trailer. Because is basically this trailer that played backwards from a zombie attack in this hotel room and like gets this girl, pushes her out the window and all this stuff. It's really like, check it out. Look it up on YouTube or whatever. It's iconic. It's awesome. Now, I liked Dead Island. I've talked about that. I thought the original game is fun. The 360 version actually sits at a 71 on Metacritic, so a little lower than I probably anticipated, and a 6.9 user score. And the PC version's a little higher. I think it's sitting around an 80. But I like the game. I thought it was fun. I had a really good time with the first Dead Island. Now the Riptide, the kind of half sequel that they did was, it was not as good as the original, but I still enjoyed my time with it. But the first one I thought was great. Like, it was one of those games where I was just put a lot of hours into it. It was really fun. The combat was fun, and it's fun to kind of mod your weapons and kind of explore this island in this tropical setting, and this basically like a vacation destination. It was really cool. And the story was okay. And I don't think I can understand why maybe some people didn't like it, but I certainly had fun with it. I think I'm in the minority in that one, though. The other thing, too, I'm thinking about this game is there's going to be some inevitable comparisons to Dying Light 2. I mean, I've already done it myself, the Freudian slip or whatever. I did that earlier. But again, not only with the kind of the infection, like you're infected, but you're immune, that kind of angle, but also just because these games are very similar. They kind of come originally from the same developer. So I definitely think we're going to see that. It's also coming like a year later from Dying Light 2, presume, because I think the release date that's listed here is February 3rd, 2023. So about almost exactly a year after it. Now, another interesting fun fact about this game is I actually played a demo of this at PAX West. I think it was all the way back in 2016. I remember seeing it, being a fan of Dead Island, I was like, cool, let's try out Dead Island 2. And it wasn't that great. I think it was a small section of the game. You do like a mission or two, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't really resonate with me. I didn't really enjoy it. And I just remember being like, this ain't it. This ain't it, fam. Nah. Now, my biggest thing is, and I think we're going to get it based on the description, but I really hope they lean into that survival horror element. I think that was one of the biggest things missing from Dying Light 2. So I really want to see them lean into that. You know, give us some scariness, give us some fear in there, and placate that. I think you can do it. I would love to see a return to form with this game. So I'm excited to see more. And like I said, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about this game because, again, I know this has had a huge and troubled development. But I'm really hoping they can salvage it and kind of bring it back to its roots, give us something new and fun. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I've got some skepticism in there because of that development, kind of multiple studios getting their hands touched with this game. But I have to imagine, given the time, that this game has probably been rebooted, kind of restructured a little bit, at least a time or two. So we shall see. And hopefully we have more to report next week. Now, this next story is another big one. More acquisitions within the industry. It seems to be pretty par for the course. So, Embracer Group bought a bunch of stuff. So it was reported earlier this week that Embracer Group announced more acquisitions. Like I said, big ones at that. So as reported by Video Games Chronicle, they've acquired the following. And I got a list here, so let's go through it. Middle-earth Enterprises, which they own the IP rights to the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. So that's a pretty big license, if I do say so myself. Limited Run Games, which, if you don't know who those guys are, they do collector-focused physical video games, and they're a publisher. Tuxedo Labs, which is a Swedish studio that specializes in tech-driven games. Their first title was Teardown. I got to be honest, no idea what that is. Tripwire Interactive, so they're a U.S. studio, best known for Maneater, which that's a pretty recent game, supposedly pretty good too. Killing Floor and Rising Storm. Singtrix, which they create vocal processing effect technology for karaoke, gaming, and equipment. That's an interesting acquisition. Tetsujin, Embracer's first Japanese studio, which is founded by Shoot 'em Up Studio Toplin's co-founder. I don't know any of that stuff. That means nothing to me. Bitwave Games, which is a Swedish studio with a passion for retro games, which I think that would actually fit in nicely with Embracer Group. And then, let's see, Giotech, if I'm saying that right. They're a game accessory brand. And then the last one is, quote, another game company within PC console gaming that, for commercial reasons, is not disclosed today. And to this, end quote, and to this day, we still don't know which studio that is. So I got a feeling it might be a big one. We shall see, though. So the total cost is reported to be about $787 million. That's a shite ton of cash. And just even more studios for the Embracer Group. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Embracer Group is a video game media holding company that has 11 operating groups, so 11 different verticals, including Gearbox Entertainment, so think Borderlands, Saber Interactive, and THQ Nordic. And THQ Nordic does they've been doing a ton of stuff here recently. And as reported by IGN, the company has over 120 internal studios and 230 games in development. And that was as of, I think, posting yesterday. That's insane. That's so many studios to manage. Now, I know they've got their different verticals and stuff like that, but that is a lot. A lot of studios, dude. That's insane. Now, I got to say, I like what they've been doing, though, at least on the THQ Nordic side. You got games like Darksiders, and then they've been bringing back classics, like they did the Kingdoms of Amalur remaster, and then brand new DLC for Kingdoms of Amalur, and then they're currently releasing remastering the Destroy All Humans games, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do a sequel to that. And so I kind of like what they're doing, where they test the waters with some of their older IPs, with some remasters, and then make some new games for these IPs that are doing well. So I like that approach. I really, really like it. And they seem to kind of just be thriving in this like single AA space. And we don't get a lot of games in that space. I feel like it's either, kind of in the indie space or the AAA space. And I think there's something to be said in that kind of middle market space, which they seem to be occupying and I would argue are doing pretty good. Now, the Lord of the Rings acquisition, I think, is probably one of the more interesting things about this because it opens the door now for more games in this franchise. And let's be honest here, this franchise is ripe for video games. And I'm surprised we don't see more dabble on this space. Now, I didn't really like the most recent example I can think of is the Shadow of Mordor games. So they had Shadow of Mordor, which I played, and then Shadow of War, which I did not play. But I thought it was still fun, at least Shadow of Mordor. Like, I don't know what it was about that game, but I think that game was in like Game of the Year in 2014. Like, people were just loving on that game, and I didn't see it. Again, I had fun with it, but I didn't see what all the hype was about. But I'd love to see more games in this space, especially like kind of exploring, I think, what is it, the first or second age of the game, so pre the Lord of the Rings trilogy in those books. I think it's great. It's like the OG fantasy. Like, this is the game that kind of sparked the fantasy genre. These books are what sparked the fantasy genre. So it's ripe. Like, go make some good shit. And I'm not talking about that Lord of the Rings show on Amazon, though we'll see. I'm not optimistic, but we'll see. The other interesting one I see in there is limited run games. And this is one of the more interesting ones for me because it's like a limited run games. Like, what's the intent here? Now, I like what limited run games does because they're keeping physical games kind of alive in kind of a very niche way. But some of their stuff's a little pricey, and I've bought one game through them, actually Mercenary Kings on the Switch, and it took forever to ship. Now I know it's Switch and it's hard to manufacture and stuff like that, but man, it took so long. So long. But I think they got something here. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they use it. Now, I'm kind of thinking this. I could see them using it as maybe their own publishing arm to help them create niche collector's editions, niche physical editions of some of their games, and just kind of use it and offer that stuff in limited quantities through limited run. That could be super cool. And as a physical game collector myself, I like it. I like it a lot. So again, it's just huge acquisitions that are going on. Embracer Group, if I haven't made it clear, are massive. And it'll be interesting to see how they use it. They've been making a lot of moves. They've got a ton of games in development. And these are some big ones in here. So we'll see. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on, kind of the penultimate, I guess, of this episode, is PT, Playable Teaser, aka Silent Hills. So I saw, I think it was earlier this week, maybe it was over the weekend, that Hideo Kojima tweeted out and that PT is 8 years old now. It's the 8th anniversary of when this game or demo, however you want to look at it, came out. And that kind of just hit me like, wait, what? Like, PT is 8 years old? That's crazy. It's crazy to think that came out 8 years ago. So PT was originally released on August 12th, 2014, after it was announced at Gamescom. And it was one of those, and you can go download it now. And boy, it just took the world by storm. And in thinking back at it, like, I have such fond memories of that. I remember it pretty vividly, watching Gamescom, seeing the announcement. And if you recall, when it was first came out, if I can pull it up here, it was said to be developed under, let me find it here, 7780s Studio was the non-existent name that this game was released under. Because when it was originally announced, no one knew Kojima was behind it. And no one knew that it was actually Silent Hills. Because it was under this kind of moniker, similar to what he did with Metal Gear Solid 5, which we'll soon find out, a couple years later if I remember correctly. But no one knew that. And so everyone goes in blind to this game. And I think Kojima said he expected folks to be able to, beat it in a week and get to, the ending, which the ending then reveals that, oh, this is a new game from Kojima called Silent Hills. But people did it within hours. And it just took the world by storm. And I remember it. I'm pretty sure I downloaded it that day. And I think I jumped in that night, like late that night, and played the game. And wow, what an experience. Seriously, what an experience. I believe even to this day that PT is the scariest game I've ever played and one of the greatest horror games, even though it's a demo, ever created. I genuinely think that. And if you have not had if you didn't get the opportunity to play it because you can't download it anymore, I'm sorry. Go watch a playthrough of it. Now, I'm so glad. Go watch a playthrough on my YouTube channel. I still got it up. I'm so glad that I recorded myself playing through that game. And I think it's broken up into 3 videos, if I remember correctly, because it's just such a crazy and iconic experience. Truly, like genuinely. And I remember, though, because, not long after the game released on the PlayStation Store and everyone's jumping in and playing it, that everyone figured out, oh, this is Silent Hills. And then it was kind of like everyone's trying to race to unlock that ending and then see that, even though it was published on YouTube and all that stuff, but everyone wanted to kind of see it for themselves and kind of unlock it, beat it, and see the kind of this little trailer for Silent Hills. But the thing is that there really wasn't a definitive way. And even to this day, I still don't recall what the definitive way was to unlock it and beat it. And that's what kind of drove people crazy. And it kind of just took the internet by storm. It's like, okay, how do you beat this thing? Because it didn't seem like there was a clear-cut answer. And I remember myself, like I kind of got stuck and just kind of go searching through forums and seeing what people were doing and all the various different secrets and that people were learning about this game. And it was just crazy. Like I just went down this dark rabbit hole, but it was awesome. It was one of those moments where like all of us in the gaming community, like we're kind of come together around this game and just got to experience this gem, this masterpiece, this master class in survival horror. It's such an amazing experience. It lives with me to this day. And that's why I wanted to talk about it and kind of celebrate this 8th anniversary of one of the, if not the greatest horror game ever created. And the crazy thing is that it's just a slice. This is a demo. And it's sad to look back and be like, what could we have gotten had the bad blood between Konami and Hideo Kojima not happened? Had that split up not happened, think about the game we could have gotten. Just incredible stuff there. Now, some of the other stuff, even to this day, have kind of come out about this game and just its sheer genius in design. And so there was one user that hacked the game that showed that after you get the flashlight in the game, Lisa, which is the ghost in the game, is basically essentially behind you constantly. Like you'll never see her, but she's always behind you. Like she's tethered to you, and so you can see her shadow. That's why when you hear her and her like kind of haunting sounds and stuff like that, it's because she's literally behind you the entire time. It's crazy. And I think what makes this game resonate with so many folks and is kind of the genius behind it is it's the simplicity in taking a basic concept of literally not knowing what's around the corner, because the whole premise of this game is you walk down this hallway in the house that's L-shaped, and it's this loop that you do over and over again, and that's it. But it's the simple concept of like in a dark house late at night, not knowing what's around the corner. That's just something we can all relate to. And I think is one of the things that makes it such a terrifying experience. It's just genius. And there's so many little things that happen through each loop that just adds to the terror. And yeah, there's certainly some jump scares and stuff like that, but oh man, it's just like horror perfection. It's awesome. And there is rumors that of Kojima's next game. Now we know that it's been rumored Death Stranding 2 is happening, that presumably will be a PlayStation exclusive. Though at the time of this recording, actually just announced today, and I thought about talking about it in detail, but Death Stranding is coming to Game Pass on PC, not the console, but PC. Really interesting situation. But either way, Death Stranding, if it is in development, presumably another PlayStation exclusive, because I believe PlayStation owns the console publishing rights for that. So that's interesting. We also know Kojima's working on an Xbox exclusive title, though again, I don't think we're seeing that game for like 4 years. But there's also been reports, and I completely missed this, of a game called Overdose, I think is what it's called, which Kojima is rumored to be working on. That one's supposed to be a horror game. So who knows? Maybe we'll get a horror game from Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, starring Norman Reedus. Maybe that's the game Norman Reedus was talking about when he supposedly leaked Death Stranding 2. Who knows, man? But that's exciting because there's very few minds out there like Kojima and Del Toro that can really deliver such a horrifying experience. And one of the things I'm super sad about is because you can't download this game anymore, but if you had downloaded it at the time and you still have your PS4, you can still access it and play it. And I'm sad because I had it on my PS4, but then I traded that in when I upgraded to get my PS4 Pro, and it's on my account. You can see it's on my account, but I cannot access or download again. That's such a shame. Konami just needs to make that available again. Like seriously, just re-upload it to the store, let people download and experience it, because it is a masterpiece. Truly a masterpiece. So shout out to you, Hideo Kojima. I'm excited to see what you're working on next. I still need to play Death Stranding. But we talked about what game to play next. Death Stranding certainly comes up time and time again, but I know it's such a long game, like 60 plus hours, that I'm like, do I really want to jump into a 60 plus hour game? It's hard. But I know I need to play it. Gosh, there's so many games I need to play. So many games, not enough time. That's the story of my life. But PT, man, go check it out on my YouTube channel. Watch my playthrough. Such a good game. But that's all I got for this week's episode. I actually didn't go as long as I thought I would. But it's funny because I got interrupted. You're not going to notice when the podcast goes live and when I edit it out, but got interrupted a couple times. So kind of had to record in a couple different segments here, but I think it went well, and we covered a lot of ground here, a lot of different topics, some more fun than others, but I think there's some exciting things that have happened this week. So let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Please write into the show. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. It's always welcome. Write in either on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. Over on Locals, you can write in the show, the Gamecite Chronicles.locals.com, or leave a comment on YouTube. Always appreciated. Thank you again for your love, kindness, and support. I do plan on getting some guests on the show. I got a couple people that have been recommended to me to have some conversations with, so I'll be kind of working on that as time allows. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of summer. Labor Day is coming up soon, and you know what that also means? College football, baby. College football. I'm not ready for it. Got to be honest, I'm not ready for it, but I'm excited for it. Let's go Ducks. You know what I mean? Go Ducks. Cotton, that's for you. I hate Utah. You guys are going to be a good team this year. I already know it. You're ranked number 8th. I get it. Whatever. But we're going to beat you this year. We need to. Assuming we got a quarterback, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, thank you again for your love, kindness, and support. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversation and the topics in this show. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.